Welcome to the Life in Pink podcast, where dreams come true, women are inspired, and wealth is our business. I want you to know that you matter, and life is much better with you in it. Hey there, lovely souls. Welcome back to Life in Pink. I am so glad you're here tuning in today because we're going to talk about something that I know many of us can relate to. Something that's a little tricky to talk about, but oh so important. We're going to talk about trauma dumping. I know, not exactly the most lighthearted topic, right? But stick with me. By the end of the episode, I promise we'll reflect, and we'll leave with some tools to feel a little lighter. But first, let me just say this. If you've ever felt like you're the friend or the family member who unloads a little bit too much, or if you've ever been on the receiving end of someone's emotional floodgates opening up, don't worry. Okay? You're not alone. Seriously, you're not. We've all been there and it's totally okay. But, let's get real for a second. Sometimes in the heat of our emotions, we can cross the line from healthy sharing to overwhelming. And trust me, it's not just you. Okay? It's not. It's something a lot of us struggle with, myself included. So I think it's time that, we just talk about that. Because let's face it, women, we've been taught to be everything for everyone. We are the listeners, the helpers, the fixers. But when we start carrying everyone else's emotional weight without unloading our own, that's when things get messy. And that's when we start unknowingly trauma dumping. So, the simplest way I can explain what trauma dumping is for those that may not be familiar with the phrase, trauma dumping happens when we offload intense, unresolved emotional pain, sometimes without considering, if the other person is ready or even capable of holding that space for us. It's kind of like, being at a party and then suddenly you throw a huge emotional party crasher onto a friend who's just trying to sip their drink and enjoy the music. But we've all been, that emotional party crasher at some point, right? We've all been there. You know the feeling you've had a bad day or maybe something's triggered you and you just need someone to listen. And that's normal, that's human. But sometimes in our urgency to release the pressure, we forget to check in with our listeners, the ones that we're talking to. And they emotionally, may check out at times. So we have to ask ourselves, are they emotionally available? Are they in a place where they can hold space for our heavy stuff too? Trauma dumping, doesn't always give that consideration, right? So why do we do this? Why do we end up unloading all of our emotional baggage onto somebody else, even if we don't mean to? It's simple. Because we're human. We're built to connect, to share, and to seek comfort. And let's be honest, sometimes our emotions can feel like a freight train barreling through us. And the people that we love are often, the closest targets. But that's where the line can blur between healthy sharing, and overwhelming someone else with the weight of our pain. We've been conditioned to hold a lot of things in. Okay, listeners, we're expected to show up for others, to be the emotional rock in the room, to manage everyone else's emotional, problems and concerns at times. But when we don't get the chance to unload, that pressure builds. So we hold it all in until we can't anymore. And then boom, we start dumping. So now that we've talked about that and what it is, let's talk about how to, recognize if we're doing it. Sometimes it's hard to tell when we've crossed that line. maybe you've been venting about a stressful situation or recounting an emotional moment, and you can see the eyes of your friend glaze over or notice that, they've suddenly checked out mentally. Maybe they start avoiding eye contact or shifting around in their seat, or, they even seem distracted, or they seem overwhelmed or, kind of distant, and the conversation stops flowing. You know the vibe, right? It's like you just unloaded a big suitcase, but they're stuck trying to figure out how to carry it. And then you're going to feel like, you're not getting much in return. So keep in mind that, healthy communication is definitely a two-way street. If you've been talking nonstop and, haven't paused for your listener to chime in or ask questions, you might want to just stop for a second and reflect on that for future references. But here's the thing, listeners. This doesn't mean your emotions aren't valid or anything like that. They are absolutely valid. It's just about recognizing when it's time to put the brakes on the emotional floodgates. And maybe, just maybe, find a better way to express ourselves. So how do we overcome trauma dumping? I know it sounds like a lot of work, right? But I promise small changes can make a big difference in both how we feel and how we connect with others. A few ways we can shift our approach, and I promise you'll leave this episode with something actionable. But for starters, self-awareness is your superpower. The first step is being aware. When you feel that emotional weight building, pause for a second and just ask yourself, am I trauma dumping right now? It's totally, okay to feel overwhelmed. But if you're sharing without considering the other person's capacity, it might be time to just, rethink the conversation. You don't have to do this alone, though. Be mindful of when you might need to take a step back and kind of, just reflect before sharing too much. That's all. This is, you know, this is kind of like a game changer. Instead of just diving into your pain, try starting with a simple question like, hey, I'm going through something right now. You think you have the emotional support right now to listen? Do is that okay? Yes, it might seem a little awkward at first, but you're giving your friend a chance to opt in. And trust me, people appreciate that. It shows that you respect their boundaries, and it allows you both to have a more balanced, authentic conversation. And ladies, look, if we're carrying the weight of our traumas alone, we are doing ourselves a disservice. So keep in mind that, therapy or support groups can be a great outlet. It definitely can, because a professional is trained to hold space for tough stuff. And then they don't personally know you. So that makes it a little bit more comfortable too. You don't have to feel judged. And a therapist won't flinch when the emotional floodgates open. They're there, to help you process and work through your emotions in a way that doesn't burn out our friends or you. But you know what's just as important as respecting other people's emotional boundaries and bandwidths is respecting your own. Sometimes we just need to step back and create some emotional distance. If you feel yourself spiraling or overwhelmed, give yourself permission to just pause, take a walk, or, journal, or call someone who understands you well enough to help you process. But make sure you're not dumping, all of your emotions into a friend or loved one every time. So it's okay to lean on your support system, but keep in mind that it's also okay to manage your emotional health independently when you can. Okay? So it's often said that, laughter is the best medicine. And honestly, sometimes that is definitely true. If you feel like you're about to spiral into a heavy conversation, try to inject a little humor into it, lighten up the mood. This doesn't mean you're dismissing your pain or anything, but it can help you and, the people around you navigate tough moments with a little more ease. It's about balance, okay, listeners? So at the end of the day, it's all about, balance and self compassion. We're all doing the best that we can, right? And sometimes we just need to let off a little steam. But let's also remember to be gentle with ourselves and with the people we love. The last thing we want to do is overwhelm someone else when all we really want is to be heard and understood. Ladies, we are strong, we're resilient, and we absolutely deserve the space to process our pain. But let's also make space, for each other's emotional well being. That's how we build stronger, more supportive relationships where the emotional load isn't just carried by one person, but shared by all, or at least among the ones that we love and support. So the next time you feel the urge to unload on your friend, just pause, take a breath, and maybe ask, hey, do you have the space for me right now? It's a simple question, but it can change everything. And just remember, you're not alone in this. And you don't have to carry your emotions by yourself. So I want to thank you for listening to the podcast today. And I want to remind you that you're doing amazing. And I am so proud, of you for taking the time to be here and to grow and to connect. And I want to remind you to not forget to share this episode with someone who might need a little reminder that they're not alone. So until next time, I want to remind you guys again to take the time to take care of yourselves and keep nurturing your spirit, okay? And embracing the luxury of living your best life. Let's continue to uplift and empower each other. So until next time, embrace your softness, your strength, and all that makes you beautiful.